Hey guys, tonight we're going back to 1863. So dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe wrap yourself in that slightly questionable blanket you haven't washed in a while. We're heading into one of the most over-talked, over-dramatized, and, let's be honest, completely misunderstood events in American history: the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, if you grew up in the US, you probably heard about it somewhere between a blurry map of Pennsylvania and a teacher muttering something about turning points. You might remember Lincoln's speech. You might remember that there was a big hill. Or maybe all you remember is that the movie was really long and had too many mustaches. That's fine, because tonight we're not reliving the Hollywood version. We're drifting through the real story, the one full of anxious generals, sweaty soldiers, questionable leadership choices, and a surprising number of horses who probably deserved better. Setting the sleepy scene. It's early summer 1863. The American Civil War has been grinding on for 2 years. Both sides are exhausted, and so is everyone's laundry. On one side, the Union, still trying to convince everyone that this is all going according to plan. On the other, the Confederacy, still hoping that somehow, by divine intervention or European sympathy, things will magically turn around. Enter General Robert E. Lee, the legend, the marble statue, the man who never seemed to have dirt on his uniform. By June 1863, he's feeling bold. Too bold, maybe. His army, the Army of Northern Virginia, has been doing surprisingly well, at least in the South, where the food and home field advantage kept morale alive. So Lee thinks, why not take this show on the road? And by road, he means north, into Pennsylvania. Because what's more relaxing than invading a free state with 70,000 men while everyone's crops are ripening? Why Gettysburg, though? The short answer: nobody actually meant to fight there. The town was basically a sleepy crossroad with more shoes than strategy. Soldiers kept saying there were shoe factories nearby. Turns out that was mostly rumor. But once a few Confederate brigades bumped into some Union cavalry outside town, things escalated faster than a family argument at Thanksgiving. By July 1st, 1863, it's hot. Like, don't touch the musket barrel hot. Union forces under General Buford are on high ground, scanning the ridges, realizing they're outnumbered. Buford's got that mustache that says, "I'll do something heroic, but probably die in the movie version." He decides to hold the line. Meanwhile, the Confederate vanguard under General Heth, pronounced Heath, but okay, is marching in thinking they're about to grab some supplies. Instead, they meet a wall of gunfire and start an unplanned all-day engagement that neither side can fully control. The first day, chaos in the wheat fields. Gettysburg's first day is messy, like every first day ever. Union forces hold strong in the morning, then crumble in the afternoon when Confederate reinforcements pour in. The fighting spills through the town streets, people hiding in basements, bullets whizzing through shutters, chickens having the worst day of their lives. By sunset, the Union troops are pushed back onto Cemetery Hill, literally a cemetery, because of course the battle would take place there. Symbolism apparently loves an open graveyard. Lee, watching his army push forward, feels confident. He's got the Union cornered against a ridge. He thinks maybe, just maybe, this is where he wins the war. But here's the thing about confidence in war: it's usually temporary. The Union gathers itself. That night, under the hazy summer sky, Union reinforcements start rolling in. General Meade, newly appointed to lead the Army of the Potomac just days before, arrives with the look of a man who definitely didn't ask for this job. Meade's plan? Hold the high ground. Let Lee come to him. Make the Confederates bleed for every inch. By dawn, on July 2nd, the Union line curves like a giant fishhook, from Culp's Hill on the right, down along Cemetery Hill, past Cemetery Ridge, and ending at two rocky knobs called Little Round Top and Big Round Top. It's a solid defensive setup. Naturally, Lee decides to attack it head-on, because subtlety is for people who don't have 70,000 men and an overconfidence problem. The second day, everyone runs out of luck. July 2nd begins with heat shimmering off the ridges. You could fry an egg on a cannon. Both sides prepare for a day that, spoiler alert, will not go according to plan. Lee orders his right-hand man, General Longstreet, to attack the Union left flank, basically to march around and crush them from the side. Longstreet hesitates. He's not feeling it. He knows the ground is bad, the timing is off, and the Union might already be fortified. But Lee insists. So Longstreet's men spend half the day marching in circles trying not to be seen, kind of like an awkward game of Civil War hide-and-seek. By the time they finally attack, the sun is already dropping, and the Union troops are very much awake. What follows is a series of brutal, confusing fights in places with deceptively cozy names. The wheat field, which sounds peaceful, but quickly becomes a human blender. The peach orchard, which, tragically, has 0 peaches left by nightfall. Devil's Den, which, well, lives up to its name. At Little Round Top, a young Union officer named Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain pulls off one of those last-minute textbook maneuvers you hear about in documentaries. Running low on ammunition, he orders his men to fix bayonets and charge downhill. Somehow, it works. The Confederates are stunned. Chamberlain becomes a legend, and generations of history nerds get a new favorite bedtime hero. Let's float over to the other side.
Hey guys, tonight we're going back to 1863. So dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe wrap yourself in that slightly questionable blanket you haven't washed in a while. We're heading into one of the most over-talked, over-dramatized, and let's be honest, completely misunderstood events in American history, the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, if you grew up in the US, you probably heard about it somewhere between a blurry map of Pennsylvania and a teacher muttering something about turning points. You might remember Lincoln's speech, you might remember that there was a big hill, or maybe all you remember is that the movie was really long and had too many mustaches. That's fine, because tonight we're not reliving the Hollywood version. We're drifting through the real story, the one full of anxious generals, sweaty soldiers, questionable leadership choices, and a surprising number of horses who probably deserved better. Setting the sleepy scene. It's early summer 1863. The American Civil War has been grinding on for 2 years. Both sides are exhausted, and so is everyone's laundry. On one side, the Union, still trying to convince everyone that this is all going according to plan. On the other, the Confederacy, still hoping that somehow, by divine intervention or European sympathy, things will magically turn around. Enter General Robert E. Lee, the legend, the marble statue, the man who never seemed to have dirt on his uniform. By June 1863, he's feeling bold, maybe too bold. His army, the Army of Northern Virginia, has been doing surprisingly well, at least in the South, where the food and home field advantage kept morale alive. So Lee thinks, why not take this show on the road? And by road, he means north, into Pennsylvania. Because what's more relaxing than invading a free state with 70,000 men while everyone's crops are ripening? But why Gettysburg, though? The short answer, nobody actually meant to fight there. The town was basically a sleepy crossroad with more shoes than strategy. Soldiers kept saying there were shoe factories nearby. Turns out that was mostly rumor. But once a few Confederate brigades bumped into some Union cavalry outside town, things escalated faster than a family argument at Thanksgiving. By July 1st, 1863, it's hot. Like, don't touch the musket barrel hot. Union forces under General Buford are on high ground, scanning the ridges, realizing they're outnumbered. Buford's got that kind of mustache that says, I'll do something heroic, but probably die in the movie version. He decides to hold the line. Meanwhile, the Confederate vanguard under General Heath, pronounced Heath, but okay, is marching in thinking they're about to grab some supplies. Instead, they meet a wall of gunfire and start an unplanned all-day engagement that neither side can fully control. The first day, chaos in the wheat fields. Gettysburg's first day is messy, like every first day ever. Union forces hold strong in the morning, then crumble in the afternoon when Confederate reinforcements pour in. The fighting spills through the town streets, people hiding in basements, bullets whizzing through shutters, and chickens having the worst day of their lives. By sunset, the Union troops are pushed back onto Cemetery Hill, literally a cemetery, because of course the battle would take place there. Symbolism apparently loves an open graveyard. Lee, watching his army push forward, feels confident.
He's got the Union cornered against a ridge. He thinks maybe, just maybe, this is where he wins the war. But here's the thing about confidence in war. It's usually temporary. The Union gathers itself. That night, under the hazy summer sky, Union reinforcements start rolling in. General George Meade, newly appointed to lead the Army of the Potomac just days before, arrives with the look of a man who definitely didn't ask for this job. Meade's plan? Hold the high ground. Let Lee come to him. Make the Confederates bleed for every inch. By dawn on July 2nd, the Union line curves like a giant fishhook from Cope's Hill on the right down along Cemetery Hill past Cemetery Ridge and ending at two rocky knobs called Little Round Top and Big Round Top. It's a solid defensive setup. Naturally, Lee decides to attack it head-on, because subtlety is for people who don't have 70,000 men and an overconfidence problem. The second day, everyone runs out of luck. July 2nd begins with heat shimmering off the ridges. You could fry an egg on a cannon. Both sides prepare for a day that, spoiler alert, will not go according to plan. Lee orders his right-hand man, General Longstreet, to attack the Union left flank, basically to march around and crush them from the side. Longstreet hesitates. He's not feeling it. He knows the ground is bad, the timing is off, and the Union might already be fortified. But Lee insists. So Longstreet's men spend half the day marching in circles trying not to be seen, kind of like an awkward game of Civil War hide and seek. By the time they finally attack, the sun's already dropping and the Union troops are very much awake. What follows is a series of brutal, confusing fights in places with deceptively cozy names. The wheat field, which sounds peaceful, but quickly becomes a human blender. The peach orchard, which tragically has 0 peaches left by nightfall. Devil's Den, which, well, lives up to his name. At Little Round Top, a young Union officer named Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain pulls off one of those last-minute textbook maneuvers you hear about in documentaries. Running low on ammunition, he orders his men to fix bayonets and charge downhill. Somehow, it works. The Confederates are stunned. Chamberlain becomes a legend, and generations of history nerds get a new favorite bedtime hero. Let's float over to the other side. While all that chaos unfolds on the Union left flank, the right flank is having its own existential crisis. Confederate divisions slam into Cope's Hill and Cemetery Hill through the afternoon and into the night. The fighting is fierce but fragmented, more like angry bursts than a coordinated push. Trees splinter, smoke hangs in the humid air, and soldiers are firing at muzzle flashes rather than actual shapes. By the time darkness falls, neither side really knows who won. But the Union still holds the high ground, and in this battle, that's everything. Lee, undeterred, decides he's not finished. He believes the Union center, the line along Cemetery Ridge, is weak. And because hubris is apparently contagious, he decides that tomorrow, July 3rd, will be the grand finale. The third day, Pickett's charge. You know that feeling when you wake up, realize you made terrible decisions the day before, and then decide to double down anyway? That's basically Lee on July 3rd. He wakes up determined to win this thing with one dramatic gesture. He lines up 12,000 men for a frontal assault across open fields, nearly a mile of open ground straight into the heart of the Union line. Even his subordinates are quietly horrified. Longstreet reportedly tries to talk him out of it, saying it's suicide. Lee insists, because when you've been right too many times, you start to think you're invincible. The Confederates prepare under the blazing sun. Artillery lines up, cannons gleaming. Around 1 p.m., a massive Confederate bombardment begins. For nearly 2 hours, thunder rolls across the Pennsylvania countryside. Civilians miles away can hear it. Windows rattle, horses panic. When the guns finally fall silent, the air smells of sulfur and sweat. Then, across the field, Confederate General George Pickett gives the order. His division steps forward, banners rippling, drums beating faintly in the heat eddies. The march begins. Thousands of men move in near-perfect lines, as if precision could stop bullets. The Union cannons open up. Shells tear through the ranks. The open ground becomes a nightmare of smoke, dirt, and flying fragments. Still they march, because orders are orders and pride is a powerful drug. A few handfuls reach the Union line, some even break through briefly, but they're swallowed almost immediately. Within 30 minutes, Pickett's charge is over. The Confederate wave collapses, retreating across the same field they started from, leaving behind thousands. Lee rides out to meet the survivors. He tells them quietly, "It's all my fault." And for once, everyone agrees. The aftermath. By the evening of July 3rd, Gettysburg is silent except for the moans of the wounded. Rain begins to fall, soft and steady. Fields that were green days ago are now mud and memory. Lee withdraws his battered army southward back into Virginia. Meade, exhausted and cautious, follows slowly. The Union doesn't pursue hard enough to destroy Lee outright, but the tide has turned. In just 3 days, over 50,000 men are killed, wounded, or missing. It's the costliest battle of the war, and for many, it marks the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. But beyond the numbers, Gettysburg becomes myth almost immediately. Newspapers in the North hail it as divine justice. The South mourns it as noble tragedy. Lincoln visits a few months later to dedicate a cemetery and delivers the Gettysburg Address, 276 words that somehow outlast every cannon shot fired there. But if you wander the battlefield today, you can still feel the stillness, the stone walls, the ridges, the silent cannons. They don't scream victory or defeat. They just sit quietly, watching tourists and sun hats. And maybe that's the real story here. A massive, accidental battle that changed everything, led by men who mostly had no idea what was coming next.
Hey again. If you're still awake, congratulations. You've survived the cannon fire, the chaos, and possibly your own curiosity about why grown men kept wearing wool in July. Tonight, we're standing right here on those same Pennsylvania ridges, but we're shifting the focus. Because battles don't just happen, they're made by people. And those people, in this case, were a weird cocktail of nerves, ego, and questionable facial hair. So let's float quietly now into their world. The headquarters tents, the sleepless eyes, the sound of boots crunching in the dark as men pace back and forth wondering if they've just doomed history. George Meade, the reluctant star. Let's start with the man who didn't want the job in the first place. George Gordon Meade. Union general, known for his spectacles, his short temper, and the permanent expression of someone who just found out his vacation was canceled. He got command of the entire Army of the Potomac a mere 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg began. Imagine that. You wake up one morning as a corps commander, and by evening, Lincoln's telling you you're in charge of 90,000 people and the fate of the Republic. No pressure. Meade was competent, but cautious. He wasn't a glory seeker like some of his predecessors, looking at you, General Hooker, but he also wasn't exactly warm and fuzzy. His soldiers called him a damned old, goggled-eyed snapping turtle, which, to be fair, is one of the more affectionate nicknames in Civil War history. By the time he arrived at Gettysburg, the Union Army was in mid-panic. But Meade, grumpy, logical, efficient, did what few others before him could do. He held them together. He didn't plan the battle's location, but once it started, he adapted. Still, after the victory, he didn't bask in it. He didn't march triumphantly into history. He just sat down. When Lincoln later criticized him for not chasing Lee's army harder, Meade snapped back that maybe, just maybe, his soldiers were too busy being alive to run another 100 miles. Reasonable. But history rarely gives out awards for reasonable. Robert E. Lee, the gentleman gambler. Now let's drift to the other tent. Robert Edward Lee, the marble statue of the Confederacy, the man with the silver hair, calm voice, and uncanny ability to make every order sound like a sermon. By 1863, Lee was the South's greatest hope, and he knew it. His victories at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville had made him almost mythic. His soldiers adored him. He was called Marse Robert. Some said he rode with God's own favor. But here's the thing about confidence. It starts quietly, then eats you alive. Lee believed his army could do anything, that their courage and discipline could outweigh numbers, logistics, even reality itself. So when he invaded the North, it wasn't madness, it was faith. Faith in his men, faith in himself. Faith that destiny would reward the noble cause even if that cause involved holding a deeply problematic belief system together with bayonets and prayer. During the nights at Gettysburg, Lee barely slept. His aides found him pacing, often whispering prayers. He studied maps by candlelight, drawing lines that would later be erased by blood. He refused to blame others, even when his subordinates failed him. After Pickett's charge, he reportedly rode among the shattered remnants of his army saying, "All this has been my fault." There's a kind of tragic nobility in that. But also, let's be real, it was his fault. James Longstreet, the reluctant rebel. If Lee was the believer, Longstreet was the realist. Broad-shouldered, bearded, and perpetually skeptical, Longstreet was Lee's right-hand man, but never his echo. At Gettysburg, he knew from the start that attacking the Union position was a terrible idea. He told Lee so much, repeatedly. His plan was to swing wide, get between Meade and Washington, and force the Union Army to attack him. Strategically sound, but not exactly what Lee wanted to hear. When Lee insisted on frontal assaults, Longstreet obeyed, but reluctantly. His hesitations delayed attacks, creating tension between the two men. After the war, when Longstreet criticized Lee's decisions in print, Southern veterans turned on him with a vengeance. They called him a traitor. They erased him from monuments. Because in the mythology of the lost cause, admitting that Lee was human just didn't fit the vibe.
Longstreet spent the rest of his life trying to defend his reputation, joining the Republican Party just to twist the knife a little further in Southern opinion. It didn't help. By the time he died in 1904, he was more ghost than general, overshadowed by the marble saint he once served. J.E.B. Stuart, the Lost Cavalryman. Now let's talk about J.E.B. Stuart, the Confederate cavalry commander who somehow managed to miss half the battle. He was the Confederacy's golden boy, charming, flamboyant, addicted to attention. He wore ostrich plumes on his hat, sang songs by the campfire, and treated war like a performance. But in late June 1863, he made a fatal choice. He took his cavalry on a long detour around the Union Army, hoping to raid, disrupt, and show off. It sounded fun, until he got cut off, lost contact with Lee, and missed the opening of Gettysburg entirely. For nearly 2 days, Lee had no idea where his cavalry was. When Stuart finally arrived, dust-covered and sheepish, the damage was done. Lee's frustration was quiet but devastating. He simply said, "You are here at last, General." Translation, "You're late, and we noticed." Stuart's absence left Lee blind during crucial moments, unable to track Union movements or anticipate attacks. It's one of those small mistakes that spiral into legend. Afterwards, Stuart kept his flair for drama until the end, dying a year later in battle, reportedly after saying, "I am resigned, God's will be done." Of course he did. John Buford, the underrated hero. On the Union side, there's one man who doesn't get enough credit. John Buford, the cavalry commander who first spotted the Confederates near Gettysburg. He was one of those quiet professionals, the type who doesn't make good statue material because he's too busy actually doing his job. On July 1st, he saw the approaching great columns and instantly recognized the terrain's importance. While everyone else hesitated, Buford set up defenses, spread his cavalry thin, and held the high ground long enough for Union reinforcements to arrive. It's not glamorous work, but it probably saved the Union Army. He didn't live long enough to enjoy his fame. A few months after Gettysburg, he died of typhoid fever at just 37. His last words were supposedly, "Put guards on all the roads." Even dying, he was still thinking tactically. The men beneath the myths. What's striking about all these figures is how human they were. We like to imagine generals as marble gods, moving armies like chess pieces, calculating destiny. But at Gettysburg, most of them were guessing. They were tired, hungry, stubborn, and scared. Some Union soldiers wrote about hearing the Confederate bands playing hymns at night, soft music drifting across the fields where they'd just been shooting at each other. For a few brief hours, everything went quiet. Then dawn came and the killing resumed. It's strange how war creates those moments of shared silence. Tiny islands of peace floating in an ocean of noise. Lee's long ride south. After Pickett's charge failed, Lee gathered what was left of his army and began the slow retreat back to Virginia. It rained the entire way. Roads turned to mud. Wagons carrying the wounded got stuck. The Potomac River swelled from summer storms, trapping the Confederate army for days. Lee rode among his men, hat low, face unreadable. He told them the fault was his alone. But his soldiers still cheered him, still loved him even as they limped home. It's one of those contradictions that define human loyalty. How we cling to our leaders even when they lead us into disaster. Meade's missed opportunity.
Back in the Union camp, Meade was facing a different kind of storm. Letters from Washington. Lincoln wanted pursuit, total victory,
The end of the rebellion. But Meade hesitated. His men were exhausted, supplies were thin, and the idea of another pitched battle made him physically ill. When he finally advanced, the Confederate army had already slipped across the river. Lincoln was furious. He wrote a letter to Meade so scathing that he never sent it. He just kept it in his drawer, probably because even he realized how harsh it sounded. It said, in essence, you had the chance to end this war, and you didn't. Poor Meade. He wins one of the most important battles of the century and still gets scolded like a kid who forgot to take out the trash. The sleep that never comes. In the end, both generals, Lee and Meade, spent the rest of their lives haunted by Gettysburg. Lee carried the weight of that defeat quietly until his death in 1870. Meade lived long enough to watch his victory overshadowed by Grant, who came in later and finished the job. Neither slept easily again. Maybe that's what great battles really do. They don't just decide history, they drain the people who lived them.
Hey again, Night Wanderer. Still here? Good. You've made it through the generals, the chaos, and the speeches. Now it's time to lie down a little lower into the mud. Because for all the maps, flags, and famous quotes, Gettysburg was really fought by people who never planned to be in a history book. Just farmhands, clerks, shoemakers, and kids who still had acne scars. They didn't have marble statues or strategic maps. Mostly they had sore feet, bad coffee, and whatever courage you can find when you're too tired to think about dying. So let's drift down from the ridges, past the big ideas and heroic myths, and listen to the small sounds, the kind that don't make it into textbooks. A tin cup rattling on a belt, a whispered prayer before dawn, and somewhere, a man writing home about how he misses the smell of rain on his own porch. The Union camps at dusk. It's July 1st, late evening. The first day of battle is over, and the surviving Union soldiers are sprawled across Cemetery Hill and Cope's Hill, trying to find space between tombstones. It's not exactly comfortable. The ground is uneven, the air smells like gunpowder and sweat, and every few minutes someone coughs, a horse whinnies, or cannon fires in the distance, just to remind everyone that peace is still theoretical. Most men are too tired to eat. They lie there with empty canteens, staring at the stars that somehow keep shining, no matter how many people are screaming below. A few lucky ones have letters from home. They read them slowly, lips moving silently in the dark, wives writing about the harvest, mothers mentioning the neighbor's new baby. None of it fits the moment, and maybe that's the point. It's something normal to hold on to when the world has stopped making sense. Confederate fires on Seminary Ridge. Across the field, the Confederate Army settles in too. They've taken the town of Gettysburg, which sounds impressive until you realize it's full of terrified civilians, broken fences, and more wounded than anyone can count. The men build campfires with whatever wood they can find. Some have stolen chickens roasting on sticks. Others just have hardtack, the world's least inspiring biscuit. They laugh quietly, swap stories, and pretend the next day will be simple. One Confederate soldier from Georgia writes that he can see the Union lines glowing faintly on the ridge across the valley. He says, like candles on a grave. Poetic in a way only exhaustion can make you. The letters that never arrived. If you could read through all the letters written around Gettysburg, you'd find the same themes: home, food, fear, and God. One Union private wrote, "If I fall, tell mother I was not afraid." He was 19. His letter never made it home. Another Confederate soldier described picking wildflowers near the battlefield the morning before the fight. He pressed one inside his Bible. After the battle, the Bible was found on his chest, still closed, still holding the flower. It's easy to forget how fragile everything was back then. People didn't think in cinematic montages or patriotic speeches. They thought about bread, rain, and whether their boots would hold up another day. Morning comes too soon. At dawn on July 2nd, the fog rises over the fields like a slow exhale. The soldiers wake stiff and cold, brushing dew from their rifles. Drummers start tapping, officers start yelling, and the day begins again, because time doesn't stop just because everyone's tired of it. On both sides, men write quick notes before the shooting starts. Still alive, weather fair, spirits good. A lot of those notes stop mid-sentence. The rest end up crumpled in coat pockets, carried away later by someone else who didn't know the writer's name. The smell of battle. People rarely talk about the smell. Contemporary accounts mention it, but quietly, as if even describing it was impolite. When you fire black powder all day in the summer heat, the air fills with sulfur and smoke that sticks to your tongue. Add in thousands of sweating bodies, dead horses, open wounds, and the ever-present dust of Pennsylvania farmland, and you get something unforgettable in the worst way. Doctors called it the stench of victory. Everyone else called it unbearable. Men tried to cover their faces with cloth, but it didn't help much. Some chewed tobacco or mint leaves just to give their mouths something else to taste. By nightfall, nobody could tell where the battlefield ended and the world began. Waiting for orders that never come. In between attacks, there's always waiting. And waiting in war is worse than fighting. You sit there, your muscles tight, your mind racing through possibilities, wondering if the next cannon blast has your name on it. Some men go silent, others talk too much. A few even start laughing, that strange, hollow laugh people make when the brain finally gives up trying to make sense of things. One Union soldier wrote, "It is the waiting that breaks a man's spirit. The battle only finishes the work." And he wasn't wrong. The chaplains and the cooks. Not everyone on the field carried a gun. There were chaplains, doctors, stretcher bearers, and cooks. People who saw everything and rarely got any credit. One chaplain described crawling through the wheat field under fire just to whisper prayers to the dying. Another helped dig shallow graves by moonlight because there was no one else left to do it. And then there were the cooks, trying to feed thousands of men with half-burned cornmeal and whatever meat hadn't spoiled yet. Sometimes when the fighting got close, they just abandoned the pots and pick up a rifle. It's strange how war collapses every job description into one: survival. Civilians in the crossfire. The town of Gettysburg wasn't empty when the armies arrived. Families huddled in basements while bullets ripped through their walls. Children covered their ears as cannons fired from their gardens. A woman named Jenny Wade was baking bread for Union soldiers when a stray bullet came through her kitchen door and killed her instantly. She was the only civilian death officially recorded during the battle. She was 20 years old. Her mother finished baking the bread after her because, as someone later wrote, there was nothing else left to do. The wounded. After the shooting stopped each day, the real nightmare began. Every barn, church, and farmhouse became a field hospital. Surgeons worked without sleep, covered in blood up to their elbows. They ran out of chloroform early. Amputations became routine, efficient, almost mechanical. Outside, piles of limbs burned in trenches. Inside, orderlies handed out whiskey and prayers in equal measure. The wounded called for water, mothers, and mercy, sometimes in that order, sometimes all at once. One Confederate doctor later wrote that he could still hear the sounds of men whispering for home in their sleep. It never left him. The sound of rain. On July 4th, after 3 days of horror, the sky finally opened. Rain poured down on the fields, turning blood to mud, washing over the fallen. Some soldiers said it was God's way of cleansing the land. Others just said it made everything heavier. Men wandered the fields looking for friends, calling names that never got answered. Some sat beside the bodies of their brothers and didn't move until someone pulled them away. The war would go on for 2 more years, but for many who survived Gettysburg, everything after felt quieter, like the world had already said what it needed to say. Going home, sort of. When the armies finally pulled away, the town was left to deal with what remained. Dead horses, shattered buildings, and tens of thousands of unburied bodies. Locals spent weeks trying to clean up, digging graves and marking names on wooden boards that the weather soon erased. The smell lingered for months. One woman wrote that she couldn't eat meat for years afterward. Another said she never looked at the 4th of July fireworks again without flinching. History calls it a victory. The people who lived through it called it something else entirely. The sleep that followed. For the soldiers who survived, sleep became a strange thing. Some couldn't find it at all. Others slept too much, falling into deep, dreamless slumbers whenever they stopped moving. A Union veteran once said, "When I sleep, I hear the drums. When I wake, I hear the silence." He lived to be 80. The drums never left. Quiet pride and quiet shame. Decades later, at reunions on the battlefield, old men in blue and gray uniforms would meet again, limping, shaking hands, telling stories. They stood together at the stone walls where they once tried to kill each other. Some smiled, some cried. Most just stared at the ground. There's a strange peace that comes with age, but also a quiet shame, knowing that the bravest moments of your life were also the most terrible. That's what Gettysburg became in the end. Not glory, not even grief, just memory. Heavy, unshakable memory. So as the rain settles over the ridges and the campfires fade, imagine the battlefield at night. The smoke cleared, the men gone, only the crickets left and the sound of water dripping from the trees. That's where we'll leave them for now. Those nameless faces in the mud who never got to read their own letters home.
Hey guys, if you're still awake, first of all, congratulations. You've now officially survived the entire 3-day nightmare that was the Battle of Gettysburg. But we're not done yet, because while the fighting stopped, the aftermath didn't.
And honestly, it's one of the most haunting parts of the entire story. And not in a ghostly boo way, just in that quiet, heavy way that makes you realize how human and how messy everything was. So picture it. July 4th, 1863. Independence Day. Fireworks, freedom, and parades. At least somewhere else in the country. But in Gettysburg, the town was basically one big open-air morgue. The sun rose over thousands of bodies, men, horses, wrecked wagons, and a silence that must have felt suffocating. It wasn't victory music, it was buzzing flies. The Union soldiers were too exhausted to celebrate, and the Confederates were too shattered to retreat in any organized way. General Lee's army slowly began limping south, dragging along thousands of wounded men. Rain poured down, the roads turned to mud, and the retreat looked more like a funeral procession than a military movement. And the people of Gettysburg, who, by the way, had just spent 3 days hiding in their basements, finally stepped outside. And what they saw? Well, let's just say it wasn't the kind of thing you forget. The dead were everywhere. Horses lay bloated in the July heat. Trees had been shredded by artillery fire. And the air? Yeah, we'll skip the smell details. You can use your imagination. Civilians started doing what they could. They gave water to the wounded. They used their homes as makeshift hospitals. Kitchens turned into surgery rooms, barns into triage tents. There were so many amputations that people started burying limbs in piles. Doctors worked for days without sleep, surrounded by the sounds of groaning men and clattering saws. It was the Civil War's version of a nightmare ER shift. And the thing is, no one had planned for this. Gettysburg was a small town. About 2,400 people lived there. And now they had to deal with over 50,000 casualties. 50,000! If you ever wondered what overwhelmed looks like, that was it. Bodies had to be buried quickly. The summer heat wasn't waiting. Union soldiers buried their own dead in shallow graves. Confederate dead often got even less. Graves were marked with whatever people could find, bits of wood, torn clothing, or nothing at all. Some families spent months trying to figure out where their loved ones were buried. Sometimes they never found out. Meanwhile, Lincoln, back in Washington, got the news. The North had finally won a major victory, but even he couldn't really celebrate. He knew it came at a horrific cost, and he also knew something else. People needed to understand what that cost meant, not in numbers, but in spirit. So a few months later, in November 1863, the government decided to create a proper cemetery at Gettysburg, something that could honor the Union dead properly, not just a field of hurried graves. And for the dedication ceremony, they invited a few speakers. One of them was Abraham Lincoln. Now, the main speaker that day was actually a guy named Edward Everett, a famous orator, kind of like the 19th century version of a TED Talk superstar. He spoke for 2 hours straight. People politely clapped. Then Lincoln stood up, pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket, and delivered 276 words that would outlive everyone there. The Gettysburg Address. It started simple, 407 years ago, and went on to redefine what the war was about. Not just a fight for territory, but a test of whether a nation conceived in liberty could survive. Lincoln basically turned a battlefield into a metaphor for rebirth. Short, quiet, poetic. The kind of thing that probably confused half the audience at first, and then hit them days later like, oh, that's what he meant. It wasn't flashy. It didn't shout. It was calm, solemn, reflective. which honestly fits the tone of Gettysburg perfectly, because nothing about that battle was glorious. It was grim, it was human, and it was, in its own strange way, necessary for the country's survival. Back on the ground, life didn't bounce back overnight. The farmers couldn't just go back to planting corn. Their fields were full of bones, shell fragments, and broken equipment. People kept finding relics for decades: musket balls, buttons, even skeletons. Some fields literally couldn't grow crops properly for years because of all the lead in the soil. And then, of course, came the stories. Ghost tales, strange lights, whispers of soldiers still marching at night. Whether or not you believe in any of that, it kind of makes sense. Gettysburg was the largest and bloodiest battle fought on American soil. If ever there were a place weighed down by memory, this would be it. Let's float a little further, past the haunted fields, and look at the long shadow this battle cast. For the Confederacy, Gettysburg was the beginning of the end. Lee never again invaded the North. His army limped on for nearly 2 more years, but the momentum was gone. For the Union, it was a turning point, but one that came at such a high cost that nobody felt like cheering. In a way, Gettysburg became the emotional center of the Civil War, the place where all the contradictions of the conflict met: bravery and futility, honor and horror, freedom and suffering. It showed how much could be lost, even in victory. And over time, the battlefield became something else entirely, a kind of sacred ground. By the 20th century, people started preserving it, building monuments, and making sure that each hill and ridge had its story remembered. Today, it's one of the most visited historical sites in America. But if you ever go there, you'll notice it's oddly peaceful, almost too peaceful, like the land itself is tired. So, as we drift toward the end of this story, take a slow breath, because what happened at Gettysburg isn't just about cannons and cavalry charges. It's about the fragility of human things, nations, pride, even bodies, and the quiet work of rebuilding afterward. Lincoln's words still hover there, like a soft echo in the hills. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that's kind of the heart of it. Not fireworks, not flags, just the persistence of something fragile, a reminder that somehow, even after the worst chaos, people can start again. So tonight, as you close your eyes, maybe imagine that field, the mist settling over the grass, and the silence stretching out where chaos once raged. The battle is over, the soldiers are gone, and all that's left is the hum of the earth slowly healing. Sleep well, friends.
Hey there. Welcome back. If you've somehow drifted through the smoke, mud, and melancholy of Gettysburg and you're still awake, that's impressive. You've earned the cozy part of the story now. The part where we lean back, take a breath, and look at what all of this actually meant. Because the Battle of Gettysburg didn't just end when the cannons went quiet. It lingered, in memory, in politics, and honestly in the American imagination. Even now, more than a century and a half later, it still feels like one of those stories the country can't quite stop telling. Like a scar you keep tracing with your fingers just to remember how deep it went. So let's float back to 1863. The country's still divided, raw, uncertain. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address had done something quietly radical. It changed how Americans thought about themselves. Before that speech, the war was mostly seen as a fight to preserve the Union. After it, it started sounding more like a struggle for the soul of democracy. And that's not just poetic, it's practical. because Lincoln managed to take one of the darkest, most miserable events imaginable and turn it into something resembling purpose. But, as with most deep transformations, the shift didn't happen overnight. After the battle, Union soldiers went home to their towns and farms, and they carried what they'd seen with them. Not glory, not pride, but the heavy, strange calm of survival. Many of them didn't talk about it at all. Letters from veterans mentioned sleepless nights, phantom sounds of drums, and a kind of dull ache that wouldn't leave. They didn't have a word for PTSD back then. They just called it soldier's heart, which, if you think about it, is kind of tragically perfect. Meanwhile, families of Confederate soldiers faced something even heavier: the slow realization that the cause they'd fought for might be slipping away. When Lee's army limped back across the Potomac, many of those men knew deep down the dream of victory was over. They still fought, because they had to. But Gettysburg had cracked the myth of Confederate invincibility. The South, of course, didn't see it that way immediately. For decades after the war, there was this strange effort to rewrite the story, to turn Gettysburg into kind of a noble tragedy instead of a defeat. You'll see it in the old memorial speeches and the marble statues: bravery, valor, heritage. The language smooths out the pain. It always does. But history has a way of whispering the truth back through the cracks. And if you walk Gettysburg's fields today, or by Little Round Top, and you just listen, you'll hear something that doesn't quite fade. Not the noise of battle, not ghosts, but just the weight of what happened there. The sheer density of it. Thousands of people, living, dying, and changing history without meaning to. It's peaceful now, of course. Birds, wind, maybe a ranger talking softly to a tour group. But under that, there's something steady, like the earth remembering. So maybe the real legacy of Gettysburg isn't victory or loss. Maybe it's memory itself. The quiet agreement we make to keep telling the story, even when it's uncomfortable. To remember not the glory, but the humanity. And in that sense, Gettysburg never really ended. It just settled into the soil, grew into the landscape, and kept whispering through time, asking in its own tired way that we don't forget what it cost to hold a country together. So, as you drift off now, maybe picture that field one last time. The rolling hills under a soft dawn light, the mist curling low, the silence after too much sound. History, finally at rest. Good night, traveler. Sleep easy. The battle's long over.
Hey, welcome back again. If you've made it this far, you've officially crossed the quiet bridge from battlefields to memory. The cannons have gone silent. The soldiers are gone. And the story, what's left of it, now belongs to Lincoln and to the country he was trying to hold together. Let's dim the lantern a bit and drift back to November 1863. The battle had been over for months, but Gettysburg still didn't feel like a normal town. It was half-healed, half-haunted. The farms were scarred, the fences still broken, and the fields still carried that uneasy stillness that comes after too much noise. In the middle of all that, a small group of officials began preparing for something extraordinary: the dedication of the new Soldiers' National Cemetery. They wanted it to be dignified, respectful, and above all, hopeful, which, considering the scale of death they were memorializing, was a big ask.
President Abraham Lincoln received an invitation, almost as an afterthought. He wasn't the headliner. That was Edward Everett, the polished, long-winded orator of the day. Lincoln was just asked to offer a few appropriate remarks. And, in that polite 19th century way, appropriate remarks meant say something nice, keep it short, don't mess it up. Lincoln arrived in Gettysburg on November 18th. The town, for once, was alive again, packed with soldiers, bands, politicians, and curious civilians. The streets were crowded, the hotels overflowing. He stayed in the modest home of a local lawyer, David Wills, who'd organized much of the event. Lincoln's room that night was small and plain. A simple bed, a desk, and a candle. He went over his notes one last time. Or maybe he didn't. People still argue about whether he wrote the speech there or earlier in Washington. But it almost doesn't matter, because what he said the next day would become one of the most enduring speeches in history. The ceremony began on the morning of November 19th. The sky was clear and cold. The band played, the clergy prayed, and then Everett stood up to deliver his grand address. 2 hours of eloquent, detailed oration describing the battle. People listened, politely, shifting on their feet, trying not to freeze. Then, finally, Lincoln rose. He adjusted his tall hat, looked out over the crowd, and began. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And from there, in less than 3 minutes, he redefined the meaning of the entire war. He didn't talk about tactics or heroes. He didn't praise generals or condemn enemies. He talked about purpose, about birth and rebirth, about whether a nation so conceived and so dedicated could endure. He called the field a great battlefield of that war, but said that the living, not the dead, had the real work ahead, to ensure that these dead shall not have died in vain. And then, in the soft rhythm of his final line, he gave America its most haunting promise: that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That was it. No grand gestures, no applause breaks, just 272 words. And then he sat down. At first, the crowd didn't quite know what to make of it. Some said it was too short. Everett himself later told Lincoln, "I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes." And Lincoln, in that quiet, self-effacing way, replied, "I am glad to know that my speech was not a total failure." Classic Lincoln humility. Or maybe just exhaustion. Because the truth is, by that point, he was a tired man. Gettysburg wasn't just a battlefield to him. It was a turning point, both for the country and for himself. He'd carried the burden of every casualty report, every telegram, every widow's letter. He looked older, thinner, worn down, and yet he still believed in something fragile and beautiful, that this shattered country could rebuild itself. He left Gettysburg the same day, heading back to Washington. Some say he felt unwell on the train. Within days, he showed signs of smallpox, or, as they called it then, varioloid. He recovered, of course, but the fatigue never really left him. You can almost feel it in the photographs, that quiet sadness around the eyes. From there, the war dragged on, another year and a half of blood and politics and uncertainty. But the meaning of it, the moral center, had shifted. Thanks to Gettysburg, the war was no longer just about preserving a union. It was about fulfilling a promise, the one made 77 years ago. When Lincoln was assassinated in April 1865, people reached back instinctively to that speech. The Gettysburg Address became almost sacred scripture, the final articulation of what he stood for. And Gettysburg itself became something close to holy ground. Over the next decades, that little Pennsylvania town turned into a living monument more than history. Presidents kept coming: Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Kennedy, each one invoking Lincoln's words like a prayer. Kennedy, in particular, loved the Gettysburg Address. He called it the great document of democracy, and kept a copy on his desk. And in one of those eerie coincidences history seems to love, Kennedy himself would be assassinated almost exactly 100 years after Lincoln's speech. Today, the field looks peaceful: rolling green hills and clean paths and gentle wind. But if you close your eyes, you can almost see the ghost of Lincoln there. Not the marble statue version, but the real man, tall, tired, soft-spoken, standing before a sea of graves trying to find the right words for what can't really be explained. Maybe that's the lasting gift of Gettysburg. Not the glory, not the strategy, not even the victory, but the reminder that even in the middle of chaos, someone tried to speak gently and give meaning to loss. History usually remembers the noise, the battles, the flags, the marching bands. But Gettysburg's legacy is quieter. It's a whisper, a slow, steady pulse of memory that says, we tried, we bled, we learned, we carried on. And maybe that's all any civilization can hope for, to make meaning out of its mess, and to keep trying, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. So, as the night fades and your mind drifts somewhere softer, picture Lincoln stepping down from the stage that day, coat fluttering in the November wind, hat tilted slightly forward, face weary but calm. He'd said what needed saying. The rest was silence. And that silence still lingers. Good night.
Hey, still with me? That's good. You've made it through the cannon smoke, the speeches, and the ghosts. Now we're at the part where history starts to fade into memory, and memory, somehow, becomes culture. Because Gettysburg didn't just stay in the 1860s, it grew up with the country. It changed shape, tone, and meaning, like an echo that never stopped bouncing. It's strange, isn't it? A place that began as a quiet farming town, just a few hills and stone fences, ends up as one of the most famous names in American history. You can say Gettysburg anywhere, in a classroom, a movie, or a museum gift shop, and everyone knows what you mean. They might not know the dates or the generals or which side charged which hill, but they know it matters. They feel the weight of it, even if they can't explain why. That's the thing about Gettysburg. It became less about what happened and more about what people believe happened. The facts turned into folklore. The battlefield turned into a myth. Let's drift slowly through that transformation.
After the war, people started visiting the battlefield. They came looking for graves, others came looking for meaning. And soon, Gettysburg became a destination, the place where you could walk in the footsteps of heroes, or at least where you could pretend to understand them. By the late 19th century, the US government had stepped in to preserve parts of the land as a national military park. They built fences, trails, and those big bronze plaques that no one actually reads but everyone poses next to. Guides started giving tours. They told stories of bravery and strategy and sacrifice, but also sometimes about the odd little moments that survived the battle, like the wounded soldiers sharing water with their enemies, or the farmer who found a Confederate sharpshooter in his attic weeks after the battle ended. It was history, but softened, almost comforting in its sadness. And then came the cameras. By the early 20th century, Gettysburg was being photographed, painted, and reimagined constantly. The cyclorama, a giant circular painting of Pickett's charge, opened in 1884, wrapping visitors in a 360-degree illusion of battle. It was immersive art before movies even existed. People stood in the middle, surrounded by painted chaos, and gasped. And maybe they felt something sacred in it. Not horror, but awe. The safe kind of awe you can feel once time has taken the danger away. Then, of course, came the movies. D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation in 1915, deeply flawed, deeply racist, but obsessed with the Civil War's shadow. Then, decades later, came films like Gettysburg, 1993, sprawling and dusty, full of beards, slow speeches, and swelling music. They always frame it the same way. A grand tragedy with noble men doing impossible things. Even though, if we're being honest, most of those men were just terrified kids trying not to die in a field of mud. But that's the magic trick of history. It polishes things. It trims the edges, fills the silences, adds orchestral music where there used to be screaming. And so Gettysburg became not just a story, but a bedtime story. The kind America tells itself when it wants to believe that deep down, it can overcome anything. It's the story of division turned to unity, of loss turned to purpose, of noise turned to silence. By the mid-20th century, school children everywhere were reciting the Gettysburg Address by heart. Every small-town classroom had a copy tacked on the wall, maybe a bit yellowed, maybe framed in cheap oak. Kids stumbled through the words 407 years ago, not realizing they were reciting a national lullaby. Something meant to soothe, not stir. Because that's what the story had become. A soft version of chaos, safe to remember, easier to sleep beside. Even pop culture couldn't resist. There were TV specials, radio dramas, battlefield reenactments with way too much polyester. The 1963 centennial turned Gettysburg into a televised event. Politicians gave speeches about healing and unity, as if the ghosts of the battlefield had finally been given microphones. Then came the tourists. Millions of them. Families with cameras, kids running up the slopes of Little Round Top, parents explaining this is where the good guys stood. They buy postcards and fudge and paperbacks titled Ghosts of Gettysburg. Because yes, somewhere along the way, Gettysburg also became one of America's most haunted places. People love to tell stories about phantom soldiers, spectral bugles, and flickering lanterns in the mist. And maybe those stories are silly. Or maybe they're the mind's way of keeping the memory alive, giving voice to the echoes that never quite fade. Even the locals feel it. They'll tell you Gettysburg has its own kind of stillness. Not spooky, not sad, just aware, like the ground knows too much. But beneath all the layers of myth and tourism, something very real still hums quietly there. A simple truth, that human beings once filled that place with fear, love, duty, and pain. And the memory of that, no matter how it's dressed up, still matters. So maybe it's fitting that Gettysburg turned into a national bedtime story. Not because it's peaceful, but because it wants to be. Because we as humans need our chaos to resolve into calm before we can close our eyes. Lincoln's words help with that. They give the tragedy a rhythm, a heartbeat that slows things down. They let us believe that loss can mean something, even if we'll never fully understand what. And so generation after generation, we keep telling the story, a little softer each time. The battle becomes a lesson, the soldiers become symbols, the noise becomes a whisper, until finally Gettysburg stops being a place at all. It becomes a feeling. That quiet mix of sorrow and pride when you think about how fragile things are and how hard people have tried to hold them together. So as the night settles in around you now, think of that field, endless, still, wrapped in mist. The war long over, the memory still breathing, and the stars above it patient, eternal, indifferent. Watching a story that humans still can't quite stop telling. Maybe that's what history really is. Not battles, not dates, just the soft retelling of everything we've lost, until it finally feels like something we can live with. And that is Gettysburg. Good night, traveler. Sleep easy. The echoes are quiet now.
When morning light touches Gettysburg, it doesn't shout. It creeps in softly, through fog that clings to the grass, through the cold stones of the old walls, through the slow rhythm of a town that still wakes carefully, as if afraid to disturb the silence left behind. Today, Gettysburg is alive in a quiet sort of way. There are cafes on Baltimore Street, gift shops selling mini cannons and tiny plastic soldiers, bus tours that glide past battlefields with calm, practiced narration. You can buy a mug that says 407 beers ago, or a sweatshirt that reads Gettysburg, where history sleeps. It's all a little strange, a little sweet, like a museum built inside a memory that still breathes. Walk a few blocks from the tourist heart of town and the air changes. The laughter fades, replaced by that steady, open stillness that locals know so well. There are moments when you can stand on a ridge, feel the breeze slide past you, and swear you can almost hear something moving through it. Not voices, not ghosts exactly, but the hum of history itself. That's the thing about Gettysburg today. It wears its past like a shadow. Not heavy, but constant. Every tree line, every ridge, every narrow road has seen more than it can ever tell. And yet the people who live here, the shopkeepers, the park rangers, the families, they've made peace with it. They've learned how to share space with ghosts. You can feel that balance most clearly at sunset. The day's last light pours over the fields, painting everything gold and red. The bronze statues catch fire in the glow, generals on horseback, infantrymen frozen mid-step, silent forever. Cars roll by slowly, the sound of gravel soft and rhythmic.
And if you listen, you can almost believe the battlefield is exhaling, letting go of everything it's carried for more than a century and a half. Tourists take pictures. Kids run between cannons, pretending to fight invisible battles. Somewhere, a guide tells a group that the spirits of the fallen still walk these hills. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. But the story feels right. Because Gettysburg isn't haunted in a frightening way. It's haunted in a human way. It remembers us. At night, the town lights flicker on, warm, small, inviting. You can hear the faint hum of conversation from the bars, the quiet strum of a guitar from an open window, the distant call of an owl. And somewhere beyond the edge of town, where the monuments fade into open fields, the stars come out again. The same stars that watched the battle, the same stars that watched Lincoln speak, the same stars that still refuse to take sides. People come to Gettysburg searching for something different. Some want history, some want answers, and some, maybe most, just want to feel something real in a world that's gotten too loud, too fast, too easy to forget. They walk the fields and stand where others once fell, and even if they don't fully understand what happened, they leave knowing they've stood somewhere that mattered. And maybe that's enough. Because Gettysburg, in the end, isn't just about war. It's about what happens after. It's about the long, quiet work of remembering, the gentle tending of stories so they don't disappear. Every statue, every faded letter, every whisper of wind through the grass is a reminder that even the loudest moments in history eventually find their way back to silence. So if you ever visit, maybe years from now, maybe soon, try this. Wake up early. Go out before dawn, when the fog is still thick over the fields. Stand on Cemetery Ridge, close your eyes, and listen. You won't hear drums or gunfire. You'll hear birds, wind, the heartbeat of the earth, steady and forgiving. And for a moment, you'll understand why this place still holds people close, not because it's haunted by death, but because it's alive with memory. Gettysburg doesn't ask you to mourn. It asks you to notice, to remember that every quiet morning, every peaceful night is built on the echoes of something once unbearable and somehow miraculously survived. And as the mist lifts and the world begins to glow, you might just feel it. That same stillness Lincoln must have felt as he looked across these hills. A silence that means not emptiness, but endurance. The kind of silence that helps you breathe deeper. The kind of silence that lets you sleep. Good night, Gettysburg. And thank you for keeping watch.
So here we are. The lights are low, the story's almost done. In Gettysburg, that quiet patch of rolling hills and whispered names begins to fade into the soft dark of memory again. It's funny how history works, isn't it? We spend so much time chasing the noise, the cannon fire, the speeches, the grand parades, but it's the silence that actually lasts. The kind of silence that doesn't mean over. It means after. It means remember. Lincoln's words still hang in the air like mist. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. He said it humbly, almost shyly, like he wasn't sure anyone would remember. And yet here we are, more than 160 years later, still whispering them in classrooms, in documentaries, in bedtime monologues like this one. Because the echo never really dies. That's the thing about places like Gettysburg.
You can pave the roads, build gift shops, sell history-themed coffee mugs, but the heartbeat underneath doesn't go away. It hums, low, steady, patient, waiting for someone to stop scrolling, look up, and listen. History's strange like that. It doesn't want your attention all the time. It just wants a quiet corner of your mind where it can sit and breathe for a bit. It doesn't need you to believe in ghosts, only to understand that every hill, every name on a stone, every echo of a word once spoken still exists somewhere in the air. And maybe that's enough. Because the truth is, Gettysburg wasn't just a battle. It was a mirror. It showed a nation what it was, fragile, divided, stubbornly alive. It showed the cost of ideals when they collide with reality. And maybe most of all, it showed that even in the middle of chaos, people can still try to do something good, even if it's small, even if it's just a speech under a gray November sky. Lincoln didn't win the war that day. He didn't heal the country or fix the grief or erase the mistakes that came after. But he gave the pain a purpose. And that's something most of us spend our whole lives trying to do. The hills at Gettysburg are quiet now, yes, but that quiet isn't emptiness. It's full of everything that came before, every soldier's breath, every mother's letter, every tear that soaked into the dirt. You can almost hear it if you slow down enough, the soft rhythm of the earth carrying their stories forward. And in some very small way, by listening tonight, you've joined that rhythm. You've kept the echo alive just a little longer. So as you drift off, let the story fade. Let the sound of old horses and whispered speeches turn into the hum of your own breath. The past doesn't need you to fix it. It just needs you to notice it existed. Maybe tomorrow you'll forget half the details. Who flanked who, which hill was which. That's fine. What matters is the feeling. The strange, quiet understanding that we live inside the echoes of people who came before us. Their stories shape the air we breathe, the words we use, the country we walk on. And somewhere in the dark, the ghosts of Gettysburg are okay with that. They've seen enough noise. They prefer the quiet now. The sound of crickets, maybe. The slow roll of fog over the fields, the lull of history doing what it does best, remembering softly. So rest easy. The story doesn't end here. It never does. It just settles down for the night, like a candle burning low, a voice fading into the distance, a promise whispered to the wind. We remember. Good night, traveler. Sleep well, and may the echoes be kind tonight.